to the cloud. All right, so welcome to our first NECI webinar of the fall season. My name is James Shope. I am the chair of the NECI Curriculum Working Group. Today we'll be hearing from Josh Lowe from the Yale from the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication. Now, before we get started, I would like to remind you that, again, first, this is being recorded. Second, you are currently all muted. Please put yourself on mute if you are not. If you have a question, we are saving questions for the end of the presentation. So if you want to put your questions in chat, please go ahead. Also, towards the end, there'll be an opportunity to come off of mute to ask any more complicated questions than can be put in the chat box. So with that, I'd like to introduce Josh Lowe. And he leads the Yale Program on Climate Change Communications, strategy for engaging and supporting the climate and clean energy advocacy, media, government, and education communities. A lot of folks in Extension already use these resources, so this is going to be a very informative webinar. Josh has 20 years of experience leading social change campaigns to help organizations solve strategic challenges, clarify their goals, and develop the capacity for strategic climate communication and transformational organizing. His passion for nurturing volunteers and empowering community leaders to lead on climate solutions underscores his deep experience scaling supporter recruitment, managing coalitions, and leveraging multi-channel communication strategies. So with this, let's all extend a welcome to Josh. And Josh, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much, James. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been really great to get to know some of the folks with the National Extension, and I'm really looking forward to continuing the process of getting to know y'all and learning more and more about your good work. So I'm going to share my screen. Y'all are seeing my slides and not my notes? Yep, okay,
Correct.
great. So drop in the chat, when you think about climate change, what do you feel? Love to hear like what you feel about sadness, depressed, anxious, frustrated, dread. Yeah, concerned. Action. Okay, a positive emotion. That's good. Confusion, disappointment. Anxious. Frustration. Yeah. Stacy's empowered to teach and act, which I love. Some fear, overwhelmed. Kathy, I've been there with Kathy. So now let me change the question a little bit. When you think about climate change, how do you want to feel? And again, drop that in the chat. Optimistic, impactful, optimistic, relieved, resilient, inspired, safe. Oh, okay. In control. Yeah, efficacy is super important. Supported. Preparedness, proud. Safer. What's this? Karim, I hope I'm getting your name right. Excited about the possibilities for collective action and society transformation. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to ask, who are your key audiences? K-12 teachers, the public, farmers, decision makers, landowners, master gardeners, the working class. Okay. Lower income adult resident. Okay, cool. That's super helpful. And so when you talk about climate change, what do you want your audience to feel? Formed, hopeful, empowered, motivated, ready. Ready's good. Ready's a good word. Concerned but capable. Okay. And what do you want them to do? Jaden wants some urgency for action. I appreciate that. Act passionately. Cool. Create positive local change. Awesome. Support biodiversity. Like these are some really important and powerful things. And I really appreciate the work that y'all are doing to make these happen. So today I'm going to talk about engaging Americans to build public and political will for climate action. Like James said, my name's Joshua Lowe. I'm the partnerships director for the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication. I really got my start as a community organizer and as an activist organizing around cleaning up toxic pollution in Memphis, where I was going to college. Since then, I've organized and run campaigns at the local, state, national, and now international levels. And my work is really propelled by a curiosity about how we can do this work better as organizers, as communicators, and advocates. Um, I've always been curious about not just what the right messages are, but how to engage audiences in a way that moves people from intent to action and builds local leadership. So at the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication, we're a research center at the Yale School of Environment. We do two big things. We uh, do scientific studies on public beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. And then we build partnerships to help advocates, businesses, educators, and government build public and political will for action. So what about political will? Why am I talking about that? Well, in 1970, um, the millions of Americans joined together to observe Earth Day, to get out on the streets. This was one of the largest mass mobilizations in history. And not too long after that, Richard Nixon created the Environmental Protection Agency. There were similarly around that time, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, major environmental legislation was passed. And that was because the movement, there had been work to build public and political will for climate action. So what do I mean by public and political will? So public will refers to a social system's shared recognition of a particular problem and their resolve to address the situation through sustained collective action. So you can think about all the mitigation and adaptation behaviors that people are doing, people contacting public officials, pro-climate consumer behaviors is all indicators of whether there's public will. Political will is the willingness or unwillingness of government officials to enact policies. And we really need both. We need movements, campaigns, and narrative capacity to create the public will that then we can advocate with policymakers to build public will, and then others can lobby to take delivery on policy. But this all starts with the first rule of communication, which is to know your audience. And your audience will not and may not need to think about climate change the way that you do. Maybe you got involved because you really care about wildlife and you're worried about the moose and all the like challenges that the moose are having with extreme weather and higher temperatures. But maybe your audience got involved for different reasons. Maybe they're interested because they care about future generations. Or maybe because they're looking for a job in the clean energy industry. And that's okay. We want to meet our audiences where they're at and we'll listen to them. One of the ways that we do that at YPCCC is we do nationally representative surveys. We call it Climate Change in the American Mind. This is a twice yearly survey that's been going on since 2008. We do a fall wave and a spring wave. And this really gives us an unparalleled perspective on where Americans are at and how they have changed over time. And we do this in partnership with our friends at George Mason University 4C. And so what do we find? Well, we find 7 out of 10 Americans think global warming is happening. That's compared to just 15% that don't think it's happening. A majority of Americans think global warming is mostly human caused. It's more than double that think that it's mostly natural changes in the environment. This is important because if you don't think global warming is human caused, you may not think that you have the power to do something about it. A majority of Americans are worried about global warming. And what's particularly important is that very worried number, that dark green, which is more than triple what it was in 2010. That's strongly correlated with a willingness to take action. Many Americans think global warming will harm them, but they think others will be harmed more. So, it's a problem for plant and animal species or future generations or people in the developing world, but not necessarily people in your community, your family, or you personally. And again, if you thinking about whether or not global warming is going to harm you personally or your family is strongly correlated with whether or not you're willing to take action. And Americans' viewpoints are nuanced. They also think global warming is affecting extreme weather events and related impacts at varying levels. We gave Americans a really hard climate literacy test unintentionally and asked them, how much do you think global warming is affecting the following in the United States? Well, overall, Americans did okay on the top, which is extreme heat. The plurality said that it's affecting extreme heat a lot, and a majority said at least a little. And then, down the line, wildfires, drought, flooding, air pollution, all of these, there's some scientific basis, but extreme heat is where there's the strongest attribution there. And yet, most Americans rarely or never discuss global warming with family or friends. Where most Americans are worried about climate change and believe that it's real, they're not necessarily sharing this with the people they care about the most. And they're not necessarily hearing about global warming in the media. So, and we've seen some really disturbing, like where most climate beliefs and behaviors have been relatively steady over the last year, there has been a drop in how much people are hearing about global warming in the media. And they all could hear about it a lot more, whether that's TV and the newspaper or whether they're getting their news and information through TikTok. And most registered voters support many climate-friendly energy policies. That many of them have bipartisan support. And even the policies that have less than majority Republican support, there's still 30% of conservative Republicans that support requiring fossil fuel companies to pay for the damages caused by global warming. I mean, that's a significant number, and it shows that while there's unanimity amongst the Democrats, this is an issue that divides the Republican Party, and that means that there are opportunities to build bipartisan coalitions. And a large majority of registered voters oppose eliminating programs such as those at NOAA and the EPA doing research, or eliminating FEMA, which helps protect us from and address some of the worst impacts of global warming. Um, this is all, except for conservative Republicans, and bipartisan majorities support these agencies and these policies. But those are all at the national level. We don't live at the national level, most of us. Most of us live in communities, and think about our neighbors and how they engage with these issues. And so we created the Yale Climate Opinion Maps. So these take the nationally representative survey data and provide numbers at the local level down to the county. And I think a lot of y'all have used these. And one thing that surprises me and is not only the variation across communities, but overwhelmingly, there are many people who care about this issue, whether you're in a city, a county, in an urban place, um, a rural place. There are people in your community that are worried about global warming and taking action um, to do something about it. We also have the Yale Climate Opinion fact sheets, which take that same data and then provide it in an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that can be customized. These are super helpful if you're having a class or tabling at a community event, someplace where you don't have access to the internet. You can print these out and hand them out. If you're trying to convince your boss why you should talk about climate change, this can be a useful resource for that. And we have those for every state and county, and almost half the congressional districts. But of course, Americans don't divide neatly into climate activists or opponents. They respond to the issue in different ways. We call that global warming 6 Americas. And so if you had to guess, and drop it in the chat, which do you think is the largest group and which do you think is the smallest group? And while you're doing that, I'm going to describe what these groups are. So the alarmed are those folks that think climate change is real, it's happening now, and they generally support policy solutions to address it, but they may not know what they or their community can do about it. The concerned think that global warming is a more distant problem in time and space, but generally they're supportive of climate policies and would like to know what they can do about it. The cautious, they think climate change is happening, but they have a lot of questions about it. They don't have a depth of knowledge about it. If they think global warming is real, but they don't think it's an urgent problem. The disengaged really haven't heard very much about global warming. And so they are going about their day, and they just don't. A lot of them have a lot of other things going on in their lives, and they're just trying to make it. The doubtful, if they think global warming is real, they don't think it's human caused. And then the dismissive are those people who think that climate change is a hoax. So we got one guess in the chat. Any other guesses of which is the largest and which is the smallest? Kathy thinks concerned is the largest, dismissive the smallest, disengaged, I'm guessing, is the largest. Will thinks largest is concerned, smallest is dismissive. August, I'm guessing that means the cautious is the largest. Okay, so some people think that disengaged. The reality is that concerned is the largest, but it's at statistically the same size as the alarmed. That means that a majority of Americans are alarmed or concerned about climate change. That's compared to just 10% that are dismissive, the folks that think are the hoax. And yet those dismissive folks are given a disproportionate share of the airwaves. They're overrepresented in Congress. And we oftentimes think that we need to convince them to take, like, that's the goal of our communication, is to convince the dismissive. On the other hand, like, some people were wondering about the disengaged or thinking the disengaged might be the largest. The disengaged is really just 5%. And like, I can understand why people might think disengaged, but when we say disengaged, we really mean the people who don't know anything about the issue. So yeah, and Jennifer says, like, this is encouraging. It's totally encouraging. This can change your strategy of how to engage with a community. And what's also encouraging is that the alarmed has grown over the past few years. People are moving from the cautious to the concerned, and from the concerned to the alarmed. People are connecting the dots, although it's really important that we help them connect those dots, because no one directly experiences climate change. They experience climate change through extreme weather or through some other impact. So helping people connect those things. And Americans, when we ask them, if you could ask an expert on global warming one question, what question would you ask? And the alarmed want to know what they can do and if there's still time to act. The cautious want to know, how do we know that it's human caused? Totally fair question. The disengaged, is it really happening? Doubtful, how do you know it's human caused? Dismissive, is it a hoax? How do you know it's human caused? Maybe not the most genuine questions from the dismissive. But this can be really helpful if you know where in the Six Americas your audience is, to help you think about what strategies to engage those audiences. And the alarmed and concerned, that's messages about how they can take action, how they can, what are about solutions. And then for the concerned, cautious, and doubtful, it's education. It's helping them understand how climate change is going to impact our community, and how do we know what we can do about it. And of course, we have SASE, the Sixth America's super short survey, and we help. This tool has been used by a wide range of organizations across the globe to help them understand their audiences and make decisions about how to take action. So what works? I want to share some things that we've learned from talking to our partners and from our research. And so when I think about this, I think about, how does communications generate impact? And that's the messenger, message, and reach. So trusted messengers are crucial. Um, you may have heard people say the messenger is the message. We want to connect with people who we care about and who care about us. Sometimes that means value aligned messengers. This is a project called New Climate Voices, and this is Air Force General, retired Air Force General Ron Keyes. And by having these national security messengers, they were able to connect with more conservative audiences in this campaign. But we don't always know everything about our audience. And so that means we need a variety of messengers. So the Wild Center in upstate New York uh, highlighted a variety of local people working on solutions from a variety of different ways. And the idea there was to provide some, like everybody who was going through that exhibit could find somebody that they would connect with. Message matters. A simple message repeated often, repeated often. You know, whether that is the scientific consensus message, this continues to generate lift. 99 or 97% of climate scientists have concluded human-caused global warming is happening. So many people think that there's more of a debate amongst climate scientists. And the reality is that there's now and has been a scientific consensus for decades. Also, if you're thinking about your messages and you're wondering what do people need to know, we have 6 key truths or 6 key facts that we think all Americans need to know. It's real. Climate change is happening. It's us. Human activity is causing more climate change. Experts agree that scientific consensus message. It's bad. It harms people, harms your community. Others care. So this is about social norms and most people letting people know that other people are concerned, and there's hope. There is actions that can be taken to limit the harm. And these are like when you're thinking about your narrative arc, these are opportunities to really engage and help people understand some key things about climate change. And when we're talking, we need to connect the dots and tell a story. So y'all are all super smart. So you may be able to guess what this is. But it becomes much clearer when you connect the dots. Okay, it's a dog. And if you tell a story, you start to involve, and stories don't have to be complicated. This is my dog. His name's Bruno, and he likes treats. You start to have a sense of who Bruno is. And human stories always outperform a series of facts. How many times have you thought about generating a fact sheet when really it's a story that connects with your audience? This is something that we all work on. People engage with the world through a series of stories. And when we think about what messages and why people want to take action, our friends at Potential Energy asked people around the world, and this is true in the United States, why is it important to take action around climate? They said protect future generations and protect ourselves from extreme weather. That was future generations was 12 times more cited than increased jobs and economic growth. So the reason why people care about climate change is because they want to address climate change. And it's important that messages meet people where they're at. So this was, again, from our friends at Potential Energy, that when they were targeting message tests at Republicans, the messages that are around crisis, emergency, like those generated some backlash while providing information and educational stories, those increase support. It all feels like a crisis to us, and it is a crisis. And yet, it's not many people in our audiences haven't yet experienced it as a crisis. They haven't connected those dots. So meeting them where they're at is hugely important. Cost savings and matching environmental benefits with economic benefits tends to be a winning message in the United States. Engaging and leveraging the power of social norms. So we all look to the people around us to decide what to do and how to think. And we do this subconsciously. And so people who can perceive a greater social consensus are more pro-climate than those who perceive less consensus. And what this can mean for your messages can be things like highlighting how much support there is in your community. A group that did this was Alliance for Climate Education. They were recruiting teachers to download their curriculum, and they highlighted how 8 in 10 adults say students should learn about climate change in school. It's also really important to let people know that their work will be, and if they take action, it'll be efficacious. So as an educator, you have the power to equip young people. Again, this is from that Alliance for Climate Education ad. They were highlighting how if people took action, it would make a difference. And that's one, you start to break down those barriers to people taking action. But of course, don't forget about reach. You can have the best message, you can have the best messenger, but if no one hears about it, then it's not going to make a difference. So that might mean knocking on doors, that might mean direct mail, that might mean digital. It depends on your audience, but it matters that people are reached over and over and over again, because we're all busy and we all need to hear about this on a regular basis. So that means breaking the spiral of silence. Now I want to talk a little bit about an organization that really did a masterclass. It really is a masterclass in climate communications. And since y'all are all in this like informal education space, this is a great model for how people can do it. So I mentioned the Wild Center before. It's in Tupper Lake, New York. It's in Elise Stefanik's congressional district in the Adirondacks. So a really rural part of New York, not liberal New York City, but a place that is much more conservative. And so they have this great nature center and science and center up there. If you haven't had a chance to visit, it's well worth the drive. They're lovely people too, and it's a lot of fun. So they were developing their climate exhibit, and they wanted it to be place-based, but they really didn't know how they were going to talk about climate change. So they surveyed their audience. They reached out to their visitors and asked them, working with a group called Care Collective, to fill out the SASE survey. At the same time, they also asked their staff to guess where on their audience would be on the Six Americas. And the results surprised them. So staff assumed that about a quarter would be alarmed, about a quarter would be concerned, about a quarter would be cautious, and then the rest would be divided amongst doubtful, dismissive, and disengaged. But the reality was, when they surveyed their audience, that a majority were alarmed, followed by concerned. And then that they were so surprised, they actually repeated this survey with their winter visitors. And they found, again, that a majority of their visitors were alarmed or concerned about climate change. And so that based on that, they decided that they needed to actually think about solutions. So their big idea was to build awareness that climate solutions exist today and to empower visitors to find agency in their spheres of influence. So there are a web of climate solutions, and we need to invite people to be part of the solution. And they use a storytelling approach to connect with people where they are at, so that they would have sympathy and go away from a you should tone. And again, they told the stories of a variety of different folks taking action in their community. And when they did the evaluation, they found that a climate solutions framework was clear and effective, and a focus on solutions and personal storytelling helped their visitors feel hopeful about climate change. And this is an example of how we partner with organizations around the country to think about strategic consulting. What is your campaign plan? What's your message? How do you apply the tools and insights to reach key audiences? How can you run experiments, surveys, and message tests to better understand your audience? And then training climate communicators to reach their audience. And we work with dozens of organizations every year and work with people from around the world to do this. So some key recommendations: keep it action oriented and positive, keep it simple and accessible, keep it people focused, keep your audience in mind, keep investing in communications and engagement, and make sure that things have a budget, because if you don't have a budget, you don't have the resources going to them. So before I open it up for questions, and as you go back to your teams, think about a couple questions. How can you better understand your audience? And if you understood your audience better, how would that change how you communicate? And with that, I'll stop sharing and open it up for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. All right. Um, if you wouldn't mind putting your questions either in the chat, or if you would like to come off mute, just let me know again in the chat and you can ask some questions. Josh, as you went through, there wasn't too many questions that popped up, but two that
Mhm.
stuck out was one, a request to share a link for your tool in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, I actually have a tools menu,
Hmm.
so we can share those. Um, and if I can bring up, I'll share those in a second.
Okay. And while you're doing that, Amanda Guthrie wanted to ask, are you going to share your study sample demographics?
Yeah. So I can talk a little bit about the methodology for the Climate Change in the American Mind survey, which is where most of the research and comes from. So we that is a nationally representative survey, and it uses what's called the Ipsos Knowledge Panel, which is an online panel, and it's designed to be as representative as possible. So, for example, one of the issues is that not everybody has um, access to the internet. There's a number of people around the country that don't have access to the internet. And so, what they do to address that is they actually make sure that there are computers or internet devices that allow people to take who don't have access to the internet to have access to the internet and take those surveys. So the demographics should be uh, representative of the U.S. population as a whole.
Awesome. All right, next question's coming from Stacy. Can you talk a little bit about how partnerships might be structured and how to move forward with partnering with YPCCC?
Yeah. Our partnerships are very bespoke, and it depends on what you need. A few things that make a successful partnership that we found. One is to have a theory of change that's as clear as possible. So, what do you want people to do, and how is that going to have an impact on the world? Another thing that makes a successful partnership is having some ideas about what you want to learn. So we want to know and how you might apply that information. So, you want to understand your audience of people coming to like public forums that you're holding. Okay, well, we can help figure that out like a intro survey, and that as people come in, they're taking that survey so you can better know your audience, and then help you figure out how to apply that information. The other thing that's really helpful is having the capacity, both time and resources, to actually learn to partner. A lot of folks are very busy and don't necessarily realize how much time it takes to really understand your audience. Now, there's huge benefits to that, and um, so that's a really like those three things. So, a theory of change, research, questions and capacity, um, and a willingness to learn. So,
Awesome. All right, following that, Kareem's asking, are there good resources that compile stories of place-based climate action that you can point us to? I don't know if you have some links immediately. There's also, if you find things later, I can always share them out. But if you have some information off the top of your head.
yeah, the good news is that so there is more there over the last few years. There has been a lot of coverage of how climate change is impacting local communities. Um, One of the best resources is our news service, Yale Climate Connections. It's a daily radio program that goes to 750 plus radio stations around the country. It's 90 seconds long. And there are stories from all around the country. Um, and they're in Creative Commons. So there's definitely a story near you.
Awesome. All right, let's see what we got here. Um, you also got a lot of kudos, by the way.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Uh, let's see. Shibu's got a question. What kind of strategies on setting institutional language can we use in our extension website or programming approach so that we can effectively engage local communities and the climate change conversation? That's a little bit more to chew on.
Yeah, that's a big topic. I think part of that is understanding what is the goal of your programming and your website. Website sometimes are about sharing information, sometimes they're about moving people to take an action, sometimes they're a little bit of both. So it really depends a bit on like what's the goal and who the audience is. So knowing those two things would be really key. Um, better the the more that you can like be specific about those things, like your audience really like should be as specific as like a set of personas um, that go deeper than the six Americas, but to like, here's X person, and this is why they're interested in the extension and what we do for them. Here's what else we know. Like that type of work can be really helpful when you're designing your content, is to have some personas and that really describe the audience that you want, not just so what both the audience you have and the audience you want. Um, and there's some ways like you could think about better, like trying to understand who comes to your website, what's driving them there. Do you have Google Analytics on and stuff like that? So you know what search terms, for example, are driving people to your website. Things like that can be um, really helpful. And then what do you want them to do? Do you want them to sign up for something? Do you want them to take some sort of action? Do you want them to donate? All those things are really helpful to figure out.
Fantastic. Before I get to the next question, David K did put in the chat, and I do want to emphasize that NECI/extension is partnering with Joshua here. So if you're interested in helping to shape this partnership as we're moving forward, so building this kind of stronger NECI collaboration and getting our communication messages kind of more refined and the like, definitely reach out to David K. He put his email in the chat. Now, the last question that we have here so far is from Paisley Gallagher. What is the theory of change? Is this like action and expected reaction?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, so a really good resource for this is the work that the NECI Foundation put together. A theory of change is basically a conceptual model of how the work that you're doing will make change in the world. And there are a variety of different theories of change. I think you can think about, theories of change that are based on, say, public education. You could think about uh, theories of change that are based on civic mobilization. Like there's all these different varieties of theories of change. And the question is, you know, how the key question that you should be asking yourself in a theory of change is, if I get this person involved, how will their involvement make a difference that advances my strategy?
Awesome.
Um, so there are lots of organizations that have great theories of change, and there's lots of organizations that haven't really had that discussion yet.
Fantastic. All right. And then next question, this one's a bit longer, from Scott. Have you found the 6 distinct categories and Likert scale and multiple choice type categories to be limiting? Um, Scott, it looks like this one may be a little bit more involved if you wanted to come off mute and maybe ask it directly.
Sure. So I did a lot of my work when I did a master's in environmental science and policy a few years ago, looking at like
Yeah.
public perception of use. And I ended up doing a number of interviews where I interviewed folks and sort of analyzed it against the Likert scale, Six America type of things. And I
Hmm.
found that there's a lot of like variety. Like some people would be very concerned about one issue, but dismissive of another. And sort of reconciling sort of the very effective framework of these 6 categories and being able to sort of dig deeper when even looking at a single one of these 6 and the variety of issues. And I guess effectively reaching them without like getting caught in the
Yeah.
weeds or like making it so specific that it targets one person while still sort of doing this.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. So The Six Americas is like it's a framework for understanding where Americans are at on climate change. It isn't necessarily directly applicable to other issues. So, and like all frameworks, it simplifies the world in ways that are helpful, hopefully helpful, but also it's simplifying the world, and like people are complex. And so when you like, if I was having a conversation about climate change with my mom, where she sits on the Six Americas is one piece of useful information. But I also know other things about my mom, um, and what she might care about, and what um, and so by being able to know those other things about my audience, I'm able to tailor my message to meet my audience where it's at. So if you know other things about your audience, in addition to where they sit on the Six Americas, then that is really helpful with thinking about what the message is. And depending on the scale that you're communicating, like if you're communicating one-on-one and that person, say they're your boss that is deciding how much money you have to do your work, then maybe like tailoring that message as much as possible is worth that effort. If you have, like a classroom full of people, well, you're not going to be able to tailor your message to each individual person. And so you're going to have more broad messages, but it's still useful to know what they care about and how they're thinking about the world. And then you can think about that as that scales up. These are frameworks are simplifications that are designed to be helpful, but not the like final word about like this is the one best message. We need we really actually need a variety of messages and a variety of stories at a variety of times, because sometimes some things are going to resonate with people at one time and not others.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I guess like so is the goal, or is it more effective to, I guess, try to have smaller sets of tailored messaging, um, or larger messages to hit larger swaths of people? And there might not be like a one answer to that, but just maybe your insight on the.
Yeah, there's not one answer. It depends on your strategy, your theory of change, your resources, and your goals. So, um, one thing that I will say though, like the good part of this is that Americans are more similar in their values and their worldviews than they are different. And so it's not that we need an infinite number of messages for the people that we're engaging, but we don't need just one, right? And if you only have one, like talking about the scientific consensus and how climate change is impacting your community, and that there are people and there's a reasons for hope, is a pretty good start.
Thank you.
All right. Um, so we're reaching the top of the hour. So we have one question left from David about how much does the existing Yale survey tell us about rural Americans? That may be a bit too long considering we're at the end of our webinar series or our webinar for the day. Josh, unless you have like a really quick answer to that.
We can probably segment our audience or segment the data that we have based on rural versus urban. I think given what we know about other demographics and other where things are correlated, that urbanicity is correlated with greater climate belief, but that doesn't mean that rural areas don't have people who are worried about climate change and don't have people who are interested in climate change. That they're in every single corner of this country, whether it's urban or rural, Republican or Democrat, there are people who are interested in climate change and want to know what they can do to take action.
Right. Fantastic. And I think that's a great message to leave on. So with that, thank you so much, Josh. You're getting thanks in the chat as well.
Yeah.
As a reminder to everyone, this is being recorded, so we are going to be putting this on the NECI YouTube page as soon as I can get access to it and we get that set up. So thank you again, and this concludes our webinar for the day, and I will stop the recording.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.